Welcome back everyone to another Bitcoin update, and we have seen a bit of a fall on the 4-hour candle. We did have a bit of a pump up to the upside before getting a sharp rejection and heading lower as well. Scenarios still remain the same, whether this is just a larger A, B, C for a fourth wave correction, and then we can get a fifth wave up before going lower, or if this will turn into a larger A, B, C correction in which we could test this lower lines, or I guess lower larger range between 67 to about 74,000, in which this could just turn into a larger C wave for a second wave correction to create all of this, which is a larger 1-2 setup to go higher as well. A few different ways that this could play out. We'll kind of have to keep track of price action. Right now, this ascending trend line that we have been holding, whether we did break through it, if you want to, I guess, measure it from these angles, or if you just kind of correct it a little bit, overall, there hasn't really been too much change otherwise. So what we want to see is if we do see we could go a little bit lower, and if we do see a impulsive movement and we head higher and we break above these swing highs here at 79,600 and within this range, well, we very well could be in that final fifth wave up, in which, do not forget, we have a CME gap in this area over here as well. I believe it's at the 82,000 range is where our CME gap is, and that very well could be closed, and that could be our final push up before going lower as well. But if we do see a more of a drawn out and a larger correction as well lower, well, our final support will be at 67,000, which is from a larger ascending trend line that we have been bouncing off of multiple times throughout this multi-month I guess upward trend. So that would kind of be our last support. If we break below that, and then maybe we have a dead cat bounce back into it and then we get rejected, well, then that could also be our final B wave top, which could have happened in this area, and now we're starting that final ascend to the downside to that 56,000 area, which we have said is strong resistance. So scenario remains the same. It's kind of nothing really too much has changed. If we head over to the RSI on the daily, we see this bearish divergence in the daily playing out as expected, with just slower price momentum over the last couple of days. Nothing too crazy with a large crash or anything like that, but it's just kind of something important to look at as well. And we have seen that slow of a upside momentum. So if we do get another high, we very well could form another divergence too on the chart, which could very well create another daily bearish divergence. So that is very interesting and something to look out for. On the 4-hour chart, we did have a bearish divergence that has been playing out since the 17th of April. We got a high here, higher high, and a retest of the high here on the R side, lower high, and lower high as well. And now we do see that sharp rejection. If we head over to the liquidity on the 30-day, we still have many more longs compared to shorts, about close to double, a little less than double. But obviously now that we have started to go down a little bit, shorts are starting to pile in again. And it's not just small little shorts. You can see on the Binance chart, these are 100x leveraged shorts. So something to look out for compared to the longs, where it's just kind of smaller clusters, but they do have the 100x as well. But a larger cluster for shorts with 100x leverage. So that could be a sign of a short squeeze, but obviously nothing is ever guaranteed. Now, if we head over to the 1 week heat map, we can see if we lower this a little bit, we obviously do have that downside liquidity, about that 75,000, but keep in mind that upside liquidity is building with high leverage shorts. However, the momentum has started to change a little bit. It seems like we had a very large liquidity cluster at here for 77,000, and we came down to liquidate it on the 3 days. So that played out very nicely. Now, if we head over to funding rate, a lot of people are starting to post, hey, we're getting a positive funding rate. But if you kind of, to me, it's still a neutral, even though it is a positive funding rate. To me, it is still neutral. It's not really heavy on one side. If we were to be, for example, going if we were to be dropping more and the funding rate turns more and more positive, well, then that could be a sign of continued downside. But it just kind of seems like price has fallen a little bit, and now people are starting to leverage in longs for a potential upside reaction. But it's a very small reaction, very small positive funding rate. Nothing crazy like what we've seen here, where it's very, very negative short. So if we do see more downside, funding rate starts to turn a little more and more positive, well, that could be a short-term sign of maybe some potential upside potential. But if we do continue to gain more and more in that funding rate, well, then that could be a sign that we do go lower as well, like we just said. So we'll kind of have to wait and see. If you kind of look at the trends here, when we're kind of going up and up and up and funding rate gets more and more negative, well, it's kind of a sign. Doesn't have to be, doesn't mean that we're going to be going lower, but usually a bit of a cool off. We saw that over here as well, over here, and then throughout these different changes as well. Doesn't mean that you have to go lower than these prices, but it just means a slight cool off. And then if funding rate remains negative, well, then you go higher, which is exactly what we've seen. And so far, when we've had this, we were cooling off. Funding rate was starting to go more towards the neutral, and as we were actually going higher, funding rate went more and more negative. And now that we have gone lower, now we're kind of back into that neutral territory. So exactly what that means is typically when one side is one side is heavy favored. For example, if we're really favored in negative funding rate, well, it doesn't mean that we're going to go down, but we might get a slight cool off to reset the funding rate. So if we go lower and lower and we get a really positive funding rate, well, then we could get a slight bounce. Doesn't mean it can't turn into a larger bounce, but we might get a slight bounce just to cool off funding rate as well. So as of right now, we are within neutral. So we'll wait and see how that is. And if we head over to the open interest, we have seen open interest fall a little bit, but still kind of within this overall larger trend. Nothing too crazy has happened there. And if we head over to the Coinbase Premium, we actually have seen a drop in the Coinbase Premium to negative. So we haven't really seen this for a little bit. Last time we saw this happen, Bitcoin obviously fell a lot from 74,000 to about 66,000 last time that had happened. So will we repeat history? Well, we'll kind of have to wait and see how this plays out. But yeah, so what we can expect over the next 24 hours, well, liquidity remains high to the upside. We're starting to form that bearish divergence. We formed it on the 4-hour, which has played out very nicely. Daily, it is still playing out, and funding rate is starting to turn a little bit positive. So if we do get one final squeeze to the upside and we see funding rate super positive, we close the CME gap and we form another bearish divergence on the daily, well, that could be our very first sign of some sort of local top. Doesn't mean that it can't break and we can go higher, but it's just kind of something to look out for and to think about. So on the shorter time frame, we will kind of wait and see if we pump up to see how we react to this trend line at 78,000, whether we get rejected and head lower or whether we break through it and go higher. But it's a new trading week, so obviously it would be best if we can get an answer this week whether we are going lower or if we're going to break through this trend line again at 78,000 and head higher for that higher liquidity. So we'll kind of have to wait and see what happens. So yeah, thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.